I don't often do videos like this one. Actually, I was planning to review that new movie Drop this weekend, but then this came up in my feed and I figured, what the hell, people will probably care more about this. Fantastic Four First Steps is coming up in a few months and the rollout isn't going well. I'm very mixed on the movie right now. I'm keeping an open mind. I hope they prove me wrong because the Fantastic Four are long overdue for a good movie, but there are warning signs here. Now, we've already been over the trailer. I'm just very bewildered by a lot of the decisions they've made with this thing. Some of the casting choices are just bizarre. Setting it in a different universe? Why? I'm still trying to wrap my head around a lot of it. I think there's potential for something cool, but a lot of the stuff I'm seeing is just not clicking for me, and now that the actors are starting to make the rounds, it's getting worse. Vanessa, Kirby, and Joseph Quinn, who play Sue and Johnny, talked about their characters with Entertainment Weekly recently, and this is what they had to say. If you played an exact 60s Sue today, everyone would think she's a bit of a doormat, so figuring out how to capture the essence of what she represented to each generation where the gender politics were different and embody that today was one of the greatest joys of this. When I see comments like this, I want to believe that the actors just misspoke, or were misquoted, or they're just not cognizant of how this stuff can be interpreted. Sue Storm is the first lady of Marvel. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think she was the first female superhero in Marvel Comics. Sue is an icon. How do you get doormat from that? Do you mean doormat in the sense that she was in love with and supported the man who would later become her husband? How is that a bad thing? Sure, you could argue that Sue was more passive back in those early days because it was the 60s and it was a different environment for women back then and the comics were a product of the time. That's fair, but Sue was still in the rocket when they got hit with the cosmic rays. She was still out there fighting Mole Man and Doctor Doom with the guys. So where does doormat come in here? And I'm not saying this is how Vanessa Kirby really feels. Maybe it isn't. Who knows? But if nothing else, the Rachel Ziegler Snow White fiasco really caused us all to zero in on comments like these, so you need to watch your words more carefully, because doormat reads like you don't necessarily like where the character came from. She continues, Matt Shackman, the director, and I were really aware that there hasn't really been a mother with a baby in these superhero archetypes women have been getting. One of the things I love most from Sue's history is when she becomes Malice, and all her dark stuff comes out. I was obsessed with that chapter of her life, so I wanted to make sure that there were tones of malice in there with her, that she wasn't just the stereotype of a goody sweet mother. Okay, she gets points for knowing about the malice stuff, so she's done her homework at least. That's a plus. But here she's talking about wanting Sue to be more than just the mom. That's one of the things that Sue is famous for, being the matriarch of the Fantastic Four, being a superhero and a mom. And again, I ask, what's wrong with that? There aren't many superheroes in comics who are also mothers. Or fathers, really. Sue is pretty unique for having that role. Now, obviously, she still needs to be proactive and heroic and stuff, and that's all well and good, but you're talking like the mom thing is somehow not enough, which might not be striking the right chord. And yeah, the malice stuff is part of Sue's history, and I wouldn't say no to doing something with that in a future sequel, but when you say you want to use that dark stuff and incorporate tones of it into this movie, you know how a lot of fans interpret that? Feminist girl boss. And that gets a big no thanks from me, especially when there's been all these rumors that Sue was going to be like that in the movie, that she was going to be the main character, the center of everything, and she'd have Reed completely cooked or whatever. Rumors that fans didn't like and have been souring on the movie because of. I'm not saying those rumors are true, but they have been rumored, and like it or not, fans listen to that shit. See, a better way to say all this would be, we want to honor all the classic elements of the story and these characters that made fans fall in love with them, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if there's an aspect of it that might not necessarily fit in the setting of the film, then we try to find a fresh angle to approach it from without losing what made it popular in the first place. That's all you had to say. They also talked to Joseph Quinn. Take a look at this. Myself and Kevin Feige were speaking about previous iterations of him and where we are culturally. He was branded as this womanizing, devil-may-care guy, but is that sexy these days? I don't think so. This version of Johnny is less callous with other people's feelings. Oh. So he's not Johnny Storm then. See, that's what that comment sounds like. You didn't like the character the way he was, so you thought you'd change him or improve him. I've seen Joseph Quinn in other interviews. He seems like a nice, down-to-earth guy, so I hate to make this comparison, but do you see how comments like these seem a little too much like the ones in all those Rachel Ziegler interviews we've been clipping ad nauseum for years now? Johnny Storm drives fast, he plays hard, and yes, he likes the ladies. Yes, he can be a bit of a dick sometimes. Doesn't make him a bad guy, he's just got layers to him. And as a starting point for a character, that's a pretty good one. It gives him a journey and things to work on so he can eventually become a more grown-up version of himself. But if you're saying that he's gonna be a little less like that, well, I guess his arc is gonna be a little less interesting then. Look, in my opinion, a character with one of the best arcs in the MCU, and one of my favorite MCU characters, that's no coincidence, is Nebula. When we meet Nebula in Guardians of the Galaxy, she's an evil, vengeful, sadistic villain. And over the course of those movies, she mends her relationship with her sister, she unpacks a lot of her trauma, she becomes a member of the family, she becomes a hero, and in her final scene of the trilogy, she's happily dancing with a bunch of kids. That arc would have been a lot less satisfying had Nebula been less callous with Gamora's feelings in the first movie. Characters having flaws is not a bad thing, especially when those flaws are what make the fans like them. But when you say things like this, talking like you don't want the characters to be who they are or act like they're supposed to act, well, that just sounds like you don't respect the characters and, by extension, the Fantastic Four. You set the movie in this era that's heavily inspired by the 1960s comics, but you're talking about how you don't want the characters to act like they acted in the 1960s comics. Don't you see how that's a problem? I don't understand why you would want to do this when there's a really damning recent example of what happens when you let the entire audience know that you don't respect the character and the property you're in charge of, and you're making all these unnecessary changes to them because you think you know better. I don't want to lump Kirby and Quinn in with that debacle. That's certainly not the point of this video. Maybe they were just misquoted or phrased something the wrong way, and nobody's completely stuck their foot in their mouth yet. I want to be optimistic about Fantastic Four First Steps, I really do, but that's not where I'm at right now, and I think it's the same for a lot of people. And when I see comments like these, they pull me back into that negative space I've been stuck in with Marvel for too long that I just started to climb out of thanks to Daredevil Born Again. I don't want to go back to that place. And hey, maybe this is all just getting blown out of proportion. Maybe the movie will respect the characters, and we'll wind up with something cool here, where Sue acts like Sue, and Johnny acts like Johnny. I hope so. But even if we do, it's clear that certain actors out there still have some catching up to do in terms of how to act and what to say when it comes to playing with someone else's toys in someone else's sandbox. So maybe work on that for the rest of this rollout, Marvel. Just saying. Thanks so much for watching. While you're here, ding that bell icon and follow all of my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. The links are down there. And don't forget to smash that like button, leave a comment, hit subscribe if you haven't already, make sure you're still subscribed, all the YouTube things, and I'll be back with more real soon. Take care, stay tuned, I'll see you next time.